Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Desiree Duffy, and this is the Books That Make You show. And today we're talking about books that make you shamelessly dive into a thrilling new series. But first, I want to tell you really quickly about novelty tins. These look like books, but they're not. They're tea tins. You can find them at noveltytin.com. And they're delicious teas that come in all of these literary named favorites. Sense and Sensibility. We've got some Pride and Peppermint. So check them out. That is noveltytins.com. Okay. You know how nothing seems to beat finding that 3-book series, or maybe a 4-book series, maybe a 2-book series, where you can just dive in and you devour it. You know that once you read book 1, there's a book 2, there's a book 3. Avid readers simply love series because they get to know the main characters and they find suspense and intrigue to be almost comforting when they're reading them. They kind of get to know what's going on, but yet at the same time, they become very familiar with the author. And that's what happens when with William Bernhardt and his series, Splitsville. It's the Splitsville Legal Thriller series. And he has just released the 3rd book in the series, which is exciting because that's when things really just kind of liven up for the reader, because now we can start with book 1, which is Splitsville, and then there's Exposed, and now, of course, Shameless. Now, William Bernhardt, he is the author of like 150 million books. I think that's how many you have to your credit at this point, right? He's the author of the Daniel Pike legal thriller series. That starts with the #1 best-selling novel, The Last Chance Lawyer. Now, his previous works include, oh my God, there's such I'm going to laundry list them, but there's so many, I don't want to miss any. He has the best-selling Kincaid series. He's written historical novels. He's also written 2 books of poetry. And in addition to all of that, he has a book publishing company and he does WriterCon. William Bernhardt, you're a man of many, many talents. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yes. And actually, welcome back because you joined us not too long ago. And now you're back because you have Shameless out. So let's start with the big question and then we'll zero in. Okay. Let's talk about, and we were chatting a little bit about this before we started the show. Why is it, do you think, that people just love to devour series?
Well, I think you kind of hit on it in your introduction. I think people, love the characters. It's always about the characters. Sometimes at writers' conferences, you'll hear people say, though, this kind of book is more plot-driven, meaning genre fiction. This is more character-driven. You know what? It's all character-driven. If people don't care about your characters, forget it. This book is going to fail. And I think every new book also has a sort of learning curve where you get to know the main characters and you kind of get in the groove with the author's style. And, the first, I used to say 10 or 15 pages. Now we say the first 5% or so, because nobody knows what the page numbers are anymore in an ebook, right? So you do that, but with a series, you don't have to start from square one anymore because you kind of know who the lead characters are and you kind of know, not predictably, like, it's a formulaic book, but you kind of know what the writer's style is and kind of generally speaking where this is going. And I think that makes for a very comfortable and very fun reading experience.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot there that I want to get into because when we talk about character, and I do want to talk about Kinsey because she is somebody that you love following in this series. But you're touching on something that I feel maybe there's a paradigm shift in storytelling just a bit. You think of some of the shows we're watching on Netflix and some of the series where we're binging, 2 or 3 seasons. you really get into the characters. You can't help but get into the characters. Whereas I guess maybe not too long ago, you think of a character like 007. 007 is probably the quintessential flat character, right? He doesn't have an arc. He does the same thing every time. But do you see that? Do you feel like just in books, literature, TV, all forms of storytelling, that the character development is becoming more and more important?
I think it's always been important in books. I can't speak to TV and film. And you're right about James Bond. I've read all those books. I love them. Interestingly enough, to me, the most interesting journey for James Bond is in the first one, Casino Royale, where the character actually approximates being a real person, a real spy, as Ian Fleming knew them to be. After that, it becomes more redundant and perhaps more, standard action hero kind of thing. I love writing series, though. I almost feel sorry for people who never revisit a character, because even in the best, most beautifully written book, you can only do so much in the span of 80 to 120,000 words, right? I had a feeling, I probably shouldn't even say this, but I had a feeling when I wrote this most recent Kinsey Rivera book, Shameless, that, this is the best one yet, basically. And I'm not saying that just to, do PR, but I felt like at some point, I introduced the characters. Here's Kinsey, here's her team. And by the third book, I thought, okay, we're in the groove now. I really understand who these people are and how they interact. And I think that's, a real phenomenon. I almost, how many times have you watched the old episodes of a show you like, Star Trek, we'll say, or something, and you watch the early episodes and think, wow, it's not quite there yet, is it? Spock isn't quite Spock and McCoy isn't quite McCoy, but give them 6 or 7 episodes and they've kind of worked it out amongst themselves. And to me, it's the same thing with a novel. It takes a while to kind of figure out how to make this work best, but that's the fun. That's why, to me, it doesn't become stale. Maybe if you do it too long, it will eventually become stale, but not for me. As you mentioned, the Daniel Pike books, there's 6 of them. I thought 6 was plenty. 6, good. Maybe I'll come back to it someday, but for now, 6, we had a nice character arc, and that was enough of a journey.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes too, you're right. Sometimes it can go too far and you're like, okay, the series should have been done already. It's like you milked it just too far when it should have been that satisfying ending, that completion.
Well, you mentioned the Ben Kincaid books that I the first one of those was published in 1991. So I'm a 30 plus year veteran of this business now. And I love those books, and they did so well and put me on the map. But at some point, I thought, come on, let's do something else. Of course, I was writing for Random House, and I get it. It's a business. They've got something that sells well. They don't want to see you do something else. They want you to continue doing what sells well. And I tried to keep that going. At somewhere about, I want to say book 14 or so of those. I took Ben to Washington so I could sort of get out of the courtroom for a while and make them more like political thrillers. And that worked for a while. And after 19 of them, I thought, okay, we got to do something else. So I did.
Yeah. Well, and I think you touched on something there too. A lot of times new authors, first-time authors, they come to me and they say, well, I have this great mystery thriller, but I also have a self-help book and I want to write a children's book. How do I do that? And it's really a matter of, you probably want to focus, because if you go to an agent or a publisher and say you have all of these things, what they actually want to know is that you're going to produce several books in a series and have a consistent audience.
Right. Well, that's how you build an audience. So if that is your goal, it's smarter to find a genre that you do well, that people seem to respond to, and do that as long as you're comfortable doing it. As you mentioned, during that break between series, I wrote some historical novels and some young adult and 2 books of poetry. And that's fine, I think. Just don't expect that, all the fans of your Ben Kincaid legal thrillers are going to go buy your book of poetry, because they're not. But if you're willing to do it anyway, fine. But I wanted to branch out and do different things. Nonetheless, of course, I did come back. And when I was doing something in more or less the same department, the same genre, that's when the fans came back.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point. Your poetry book is just going to have a different fan base, but a lot of times we're writing to fulfill our desires because it's our passion, and you can build different audiences in different genres just as you have. So since you brought it up, how do you find it different when you're talking about your poetry or your historical fiction or your Ben Kincaid, or how do you approach the marketing and the promotion differently?
Oh, approach the marketing and gosh, that's a completely different thing. Writing them, of course, is very different. I mean, to me, a novel is a novel, but poetry is a whole different thing. And I'm really not probably somebody who should even speak on how to promote poetry, because I really have no idea. I think there are some people doing that very well on Instagram, the so-called Insta poets, Rupi Kaur and people like that, who have been very successful. People like Billy Collins, who's coming to WriterCon this year, speaking at WriterCon this year, who become incredibly successful over a period of time because their poetry is so good and people respond to it. But that sort of thing is trickier to market, since poetry isn't really a genre. It's a huge umbrella. It's a writing form, but it can take many different shapes. As opposed to if I say, okay, this is a courtroom novel, this is a legal thriller, people kind of have an idea what I'm talking about, and know whether or not they like that kind of book or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it boils down to your audiences and knowing your audiences and understanding that you're going to have a lot of different tastes to please when you're crossing genres like that. I do also want to talk to you about WriterCon, but let's get back, because we went down a rabbit hole, and I want to bring this back to Splitsville and the series. Can you set the stage? How about if you do that? Just give us, now that we got Shameless out, give us a little bit about Kinsey and the series and what's going on.
Well, the series starts with Splitsville, as people can see if they're reading the chalkboard behind your head, right? And then Exposed, and now Shameless. And Kinsey's in Seattle, and obviously female Latina author, the 14-year-old daughter, and working at her daddy's firm as the first book begins. But that doesn't turn out the way she thought it was. She is an advocate for women, basically, and she says she only represents women, and she's looking for ways to eliminate the inequities that we all know exist in the world. And her team that's evolved over the course of these series is, female. Her assistant, Sharon, and her sister, I just blew a secret, but anyway, Emma.
Whoops.
And her daughter, and they're working together. Initially she's a divorce lawyer, very lucrative, but as you might imagine, because it'd be hard to build a whole case around that, a whole book, I should say, around that, she gets involved in things even worse than divorce, if you can imagine, like high crimes and felonies and murders.
Okay, let's really get into Kinsey a little bit more, because you mentioned character development, and it seems like in this third book you've already spilled the beans that you think this is the best one yet. Can you tell us about developing her and what that was like in creating Kinsey?
Well, Kinsey is sharp and progressive, sharp and smart, I should say. Not so much the intellectual, but she's got other people for that. She dresses extremely well, mostly just because I knew my mother would like the character better if she was a snappy dresser. So no, with the guys, I don't know what, you can see how I dress, but Kinsey, I thought, okay, she can dress it up a little bit and look sharp. And why shouldn't she? She's trying to project a positive image. Always focusing in the divorce world on early resolution, and let's make a painful thing as little painful as it possibly can be. but then her clients start taking her to other and much more complicated places. I mentioned she's working in her daddy's firm, but when in the first book she gets passed over in favor of her not nearly so successful brother, because he's the guy. That's a rude awakening for her, and starts her on a different course. This is very much a book about women trying to function in a world that's changing, but not nearly fast enough, right? I should probably say, I don't think I've even said this before, but in public anyway, but I should probably say that, I grew up with my mom and three sisters. And so, sometimes people say, "Oh, you think you can write female characters?" And I just think, I think I know more about women than I do men. Okay, so yes, I think I can write these characters. And that's basically why Kinsey has three people that she works with. Each one is based on one of my sisters, so they're all in the book forming Kinsey's team.
Yeah. Well, and that's just a word of warning to everybody out there. Be careful if you're related or friends with a writer, because chances are you will end up in their novel one way or another.
Yeah, right. But give me a break.
Well, you bring up something too. Okay, I applaud a man writing a female character, a woman writing a male character, somebody writing within the LGBTQ community, and all the aspects, whether it's race, religion, diversity in general. I feel we should write from other people's points of view, because that in and of itself, it helps the person who's writing understand somebody else's point of view. It helps the reader, and it helps perhaps to give a voice or a character or shine a spotlight on different people and their situations, like Kinsey feeling, facing some misogynistic, attitudes from her own family. And you're probably going to have a lot of women nod along with that, going, yep, in my own family. So I applaud you for doing that. And I know you have sisters and a mom who helped inspire you. But what are your thoughts? What do you say for authors who might be writing outside of, because they're breaking that rule, right? Write what you know, write who you know. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think I am writing what I know, and I'm all for representation. I don't think this is the same as a situation where, say, in Hollywood, where people will complain if they cast anybody as being something other than what they actually are in real life, which you'd think, isn't that why it's called acting? You're pretending to be something you're not. But in that situation, if, say, somebody of a different race or a different sexual persuasion takes the role, that cuts somebody else out. That means somebody else didn't get a role. I don't think me writing a book with women or Latina characters or anything like that prevents anybody from writing a book at all. They can still do it, and many do, and many do it wonderfully. This is not the first time I've written female characters by a long shot, or Latina characters for that matter, although it may be the first time I've had one in the sort of the pivotal starring role. So to me, that just seems like a natural progression. Shameless is not quite, what'd you say, 1,000,005, but it is my 57th book. So I have been at it a while, and I don't want to write the same thing over and over again. Who does? Let's branch out and embrace the whole world. I think that's what books are supposed to be. One of the most positive things you could say about the legal community and the legal world is that although it's far from perfect, that world has been at the forefront of integrating both women and minority views and people. I mean, law schools are at least 50% female now, if not more. And you see it on the bench, and you see it in firms, and we still don't have the level of equality we should, but way ahead of the curve, I think, and ahead of many other professions. So why not show that?
Yeah, exactly. So you're bringing up, the fact that this is a legal thriller, and, we're talking about the fact that Kinsey is Latina. Talk a little bit, if you could, about the research and bringing in your own experiences, maybe professionally as well. Do you bring that into your writing?
Well, not so much that people are based on actual clients or cases. And would I admit that even if they were? No, but they aren't. And I haven't practiced myself in many years, and I wasn't doing criminal law when I did. So there's very little that would really be relevant, except that I know the lingo and I know how trials work and I know what can and cannot happen. And so that's an advantage. Sometimes I think lawyers, although they still end up watching legal shows and movies and whatnot and just slapping their heads because that's so preposterous with everybody shouting at each other. That could never happen in a courtroom. Weird things do happen, but not that in particular. I'm always astonished when I find out lawyers are actually reading my books, the legal books. I think, don't you get enough of that during the day? You want to spend your spare time reading this? But they do, possibly because they wish that's the kind of person I would like to be, or that's the kind of lawyer I've been. I've actually gotten mail in one case from a federal judge who told me that he had modeled his professional demeanor and character and how he behaves on Ben Kincaid because he loved those Ben Kincaid novels that I started doing in the 90s. And I thought, wow, that's
Whoa.
right.
Yeah, that's quite a compliment. Well, how does that make you feel to know that you've inspired how somebody's
Well, it
approaching
makes
it?
me feel good because Ben is a good guy and, very fair, not always right, but always tries to be. And he's pretty smart and he treats people well. And so I don't think he's such a bad model for judges to have.
Yeah, I agree there. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because we touched on WriterCon
Right.
and the fact that you are a publisher too. So, yeah, okay. How about if we start with WriterCon? Tell
Mhm.
us when that is, when it's coming up, how people can get information, who you got there, what's going on.
WriterCon is the annual writers conference that I put on with some of my friends in Oklahoma City. It's every Labor Day weekend. This year, that'll be September 2nd through the 5th. If you can't come, you can watch it online. But if you can come because it's so much fun when you're there in person and even beyond all the sessions and learning, hear people speak, which is great. There's so many chances to interact with other writers, which I think is one of the best things you can do for your career and just for your sanity. Sit down and talk with people who share the same priorities and concerns, and you got a chance to pitch agents and editors and basically just take your work up to the next level, whether you've been published many times or you've never been published at all. I think there is something at WriterCon that will help you bump yourself up a notch. And this conference has been growing even during the lockdown, if you can imagine that. We added streaming and our numbers grew even during those 2 years. And I think we're going to see a great bump this year too, with a lot of cool people being there. Like you're going to be there, right?
I am going to be there. I was there last year for my first time at WriterCon, and I was so impressed, William. Such a fun, like you said, it was fun. You're rubbing shoulders with
Right.
writers and you learning so much. The panels, the workshops, everything was just amazing.
Yeah.
So I'll be back.
By the time we get there, we'll have 60 plus speakers, more than 70 sessions, all day classes, workshops, and whatnot. Now this year we're adding nighttime sessions as well, a little, less structured. But if you're staying at the hotel and you're there, why not go have dinner and come back and talk to some people about your genre or problems that you've been working with in writing or marketing or whatever it is. Just give people a chance to get the most out of it, out of those 3 or 4 days that they're going to be attending the conference. I just enjoy it. It's a lot of work to put on a conference, obviously, but I enjoy it very much. It's a lot of fun. And the website, I should say, while I'm thinking about it, is writercon.com, just what you would think it would be, WriterCon.com.
Got it. Yes, very easy to find. And I just want to underscore for writers especially, we tend to be a little bit more reclusive,
Right.
shy. We don't want to be around lots of people. You have a lot of the people that are introverts at the end of conferences going, "Oh my God, oh my God." But really, you're among friends, and the neat thing is you just your eyes will be open to so many things that you probably didn't know, or you thought you knew but you didn't know.
That's
Getting
right. Well,
advice from.
and
Yeah.
this world is changing so much. I've been in it for a while, but the changes in the last 5 to 10 years have been dramatic. Publishing is not at all what it was 30 years ago. And I think it's continuing to change and will continue to change. And if you really want to function in this world, you got to stay on top of this. I'm sorry, but sometimes I think when you're young or not so knowledgeable, you have this idea that you're going to be like you said, the reclusive writer, and you'll write a masterpiece and put it in the mail, and that's all you have to do. Well, sorry, that's not all you have to do. Whether you go with traditional publishing or small press or do it yourself, there is so much more involved. And if you want to succeed, you need to know about that. So 3 days of learning about what's going on in the publishing world, I think, is probably one of the best investments you can possibly make.
Yeah, yeah. And located in Oklahoma City, which is a nice central location from almost anywhere in the country. So you're not.
And beautiful and so much to see. I think sometimes people, because they don't, it's not New York or San Francisco, so I don't want to go. Broaden your horizons, man. This is a great city. Come visit us. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, yeah.
And the
Well,
hotel is gorgeous and yet not very expensive. So, yeah, come on. What more do you want?
yeah, yeah. Well, I've been to the big conferences in New York City, and there's something that's cozy and comfortable about WriterCon, and maybe it's the people, because that Southern hospitality with
Yes.
people in Oklahoma. Everybody's just so friendly, so you can't beat that.
Yep. I totally agree.
All right, so let's bounce over to publishing, because you've been talking about publishing and all the different
Right.
forms that. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your publishing firm.
Well, we have several imprints at Bernhardt Books, and this is really something. At first, the first initiative was some friends who had really good work, but for one reason or another couldn't get it published, which is too often the case. I mean, it's always been tough to get published. And I would like to be able to say, New York will find the best voices, but they don't always, frankly. And more as these big corporate groups, being because they're in corporations, they have to make money or the people in them are out of a job. And so more and more they're turning to predictable, which is not saying bad, but what I am trying to say is sometimes the best work doesn't get published. If you're running a serious novel or a literary novel today, you're far more likely to be published by a regional press or small or a university press than you are by a New York press. I'm not saying they never publish good books, but I'm saying it's a lot harder to get in there than it used to be. And it's just all around. Anyway, so to help out some friends, I started this press. And a few years ago, of course, uh, and this intensified during the COVID lockdown because my daughter had just finished college, but this was not the time to be looking for a job. And my son, one of the two, was in college, but they sent everybody home. Everybody was out of the dorms. So everybody had all this time on their hands. And I thought, you know what? You guys should get involved in publishing. And,
You put them to work.
right. Basically, well, Alice, my daughter, is of course, I'm possibly not at all biased, but I think she's the best editor that I've ever seen, heard, or worked with. She's got a real gift for it. And Ralph helps out with the video and the PR, and Harry helps with the finances because he can do numbers, which I can't. And so it became a fun and ultimately very profitable. I don't want to exaggerate it. This is publishing, but had some successes right off the bat. So it's been a good thing. And you go check it out, babylonbooks.com, and see for yourself what we're publishing and taking submissions online.
There you go. There you go. Anybody out there who might want to submit their book for consideration, go to Babylon
I think
Books.
I just gave you the wrong website, though.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's actually babylonbooks.net. .com was too expensive, so we went with
.net, a little bit cheaper. Yeah. Well, and you bring up a really good point too. In the publishing world, in being an author, yes, there are many prolific authors who make a fine living, and there's some at the tippy top who are making millions, obviously. But if you're in this for the money, just might be in the wrong business. I think you have to want to write. You want to share your stories. You're doing it for the love of doing it rather than just for the monetary gains.
Well, that's what you should do, because this is no different from any of the arts. To some degree, who's going to break out is not predictable. We like to think, if you're successful, you like to think, well, it's all based on talent, but it isn't entirely. That's an important factor, but it's not the only factor. And I know some terrific writers who aren't getting nearly enough attention. I know some extremely wealthy writers who, I don't get it, but somebody's buying those books. I mean, you just can't figure that out, except to say that, again, like in any of the arts, the number of people who make serious money is going to be relatively slender. So don't do it unless it's what you love. I mean, when I started, I grew up in libraries. I grew up loving books. I just wanted to see my name on the spine of a book in the library. That was the dream for me. I never expected to become fabulously rich. I assumed I would be practicing law forever and writing books on the side. It didn't work out that way. Books turned out to be, a good thing, but fantastic. That's even better. But it wouldn't have stopped me from writing one way or another, because I just wanted to be, in the game, part of the great conversation. And that happened. So I was very happy. Still am.
And we're very happy too, because we have all these magnificent books from you. So really quick, we have Splitsville, Exposed, and Shameless just released from William Bernhardt, part of the Splitsville book series. Tell everybody where they can go to find it, on your website, bookstores, all that stuff.
I have a website, of course, williambernhardt.com, but we're not selling books directly there. You should go to wherever you normally buy books. Online, of course, the usual suspects: Amazon, Apple, barnesandnoble.com, brick and mortar stores. If they don't have it, they can order it. So wherever you like to buy books, go buy several. In fact, buy one for all of your friends, and support Kinsey. She's doing good work out there.
Oh, she is. And I always like to suggest too, go to your local library and ask them to order it. That way you can check it out, or check out the whole series. And then other people will eventually be able to check it out as well.
Great idea.
All right. William Bernhardt, author and a man of many talents, publisher and WriterCon organizer. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Books That Make You show.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today. You can find out more about us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. And you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and of course, YouTube. Make sure you ring the bell and subscribe so that you're always up to date on the latest authors and interviews and people that we have here on the show. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.